My name is Laura, and for 20 years I lived in a gilded cage, trapped in a routine that I thought was security, but which day after day suffocated me more and more. Every morning I woke up with the weight of a life that seemed perfect on the outside, but was slowly crumbling inside me. Do you think you always know where your choices will take you? Sometimes, just a moment is enough to change everything. Keep watching, and you'll discover how far desire can go. Subscribe to the channel. This is my story. The villa's terrace overlooked the sea, a living picture painted in blue and gold, where the sound of the waves and the scent of salt surrounded everything. Yet while the sun reflected on the water, inside me I only felt the emptiness of an existence that no longer belonged to me. It was a September morning. The sky was blue and the air was still warm, but inside me I only felt a silent cold. I watched the waves crash on the rocks, while my mind wandered elsewhere. My husband Andrea, a businessman in his 50s, with whom I had shared my existence, had become a shadow in my life. Our conversations had been reduced to formalities, our nights to unbridgeable distances. And then he arrived. Federico, Andrea's nephew, 25 years old, dark and intense eyes, a vibrant energy that contrasted with my apathy. He had come to stay with us for some time, trying to put a bad relationship behind him. I watched him from afar while he trained on the beach, and every time our eyes met, a shiver ran through my skin. One evening, Andrea was out on business, as always. The house was immersed in a silence that for the first time gave me no relief. I was reading, trying to distract myself, when I heard a knock. Federico was in the doorway, his smile uncertain. "Do I bother you?" "No, come in," I replied, closing the book. We sat on the sofa and the conversation flowed with a naturalness that I hadn't felt in years. Federico was brilliant, funny, and talking to him I felt alive. At the end of the evening, we said goodbye with a hug that lasted a moment longer than it should have. The warmth of his skin remained on me, like an invisible mark. In the following days, that thin border between us became even thinner. The glances became more insistent, the smiles more complicit. It was wrong. I knew it, but it was also unstoppable. Every time Federico touched me, I forgot everything. My husband, my age, my life built on habits and duties. Then, one night, while Andrea was away, Federico joined me on the terrace. His presence was a warm shadow in the darkness, an electric energy that made me feel alive like I hadn't in years. The wind lifted strands of my hair, and his fingers brushed my arm with a lightness that made me shiver. The sea reflected the moonlight, and the air smelled of salt and prohibition. "It's different with you," he whispered. "You make me feel free." My heart was pounding. I should have stopped him, pushed him away. Instead, I moved closer, and in that moment, every rule crumbled. The kiss was an explosion of everything I had repressed for years. We lost ourselves in each other, in a vortex of desire and prohibition that we knew would have a price. Every kiss was a secret whispered in the dark, every caress a step closer to an abyss from which I knew I couldn't come back. Every moment stolen between the sheets of the villa was a refuge from reality. But the guilt was always there, like a shadow I couldn't ignore. When Andrea came home, I tried to keep up the facade, but every touch he made me feel dirty. Federico, on the other hand, seemed to experience our secret lightly, as if it were just an adventure destined to fade away. But secrets never remain secrets forever. Andrea began to notice my detachment, my absence, even when I was present. One evening, returning home, he found me in the kitchen, lost in my thoughts. "Everything is fine?" he asked, peering at me with a look full of suspicion. "Yeah, just tired," I lied. But Andrea was not convinced. Doubts tormented him, until the day he found a message on Federico's phone, a message that left no room for interpretation. "What does this mean?" His voice was a stormy whisper. The world collapsed on me. There were no excuses. There were no explanations. Only the harsh truth. Andrea left without looking back, leaving me alone in the empty villa. Federico disappeared just as quickly, unable to face the consequences of our actions. I remained alone with my remorse, watching the sea continue to crash on the rocks, indifferent to my pain. Weeks of silence passed, a deafening silence full of remorse and unanswered questions. Every corner of the villa seemed to echo the laughter and whispers of a long-lost time. Loneliness had become my only companion, and every night remorse enveloped me like a suffocating veil. The villa had become a prison of painful memories. I no longer received news from either Andrea or Federico. My social life crumbled, and with it every certainty. One evening, without knowing where to go, I gathered a few things and left the villa. I wandered along the coast, seeking refuge in places where no one knew me. But the remorse traveled with me. The nights were the worst. Closing my eyes, I saw the truth I had tried to deny. Then one morning in a small cafe overlooking the sea, I met Marta, a family friend. I tried to avoid her, but she caught up to me. "I'm not here to judge you, Laura. I just want to know how you're doing." Those words broke the wall of pain I carried inside. I burst into tears and let myself go for the first time. Marta shook my hand. "You can't run away forever. You have to face it." And so I did. I returned to Milan and knocked on Andrea's door. When he opened, his eyes were tired, lined with pain. "So you're back," he said without emotion. "I'm not here to justify myself," I replied, "just to tell you I'm sorry." Andrea looked at me for a long time, torn between anger and disappointment. "I don't know if I can ever forgive you, but I appreciate you coming." We talked for a long time, without illusions of a return, but with the awareness that the pain had to be faced, not avoided. Then I contacted Federico. We met in a bar, and in his eyes I saw a different, more mature man. "Maybe I was just looking for an escape," he admitted, "but I know what happened wasn't right." There was no longer any rancor, just the need to close that chapter. I took my life back in hand, with uncertain but determined steps. Every day was a battle against the ghosts of the past, but also a conquest. I began to paint, to fill the void with colors and shapes that told a new story. And finally, one day, I looked in the mirror and saw a woman who, despite her scars, was learning to love herself again. I found a new job. I cultivated passions that I had always neglected. I learned to forgive myself, not to forget, but to not repeat the same mistakes. The scar from that story remained, but it no longer defined who I was. If this story has affected you, leave a comment with your thoughts. What would you have done in Laura's place? Don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more intense and exciting stories. Every hidden secret deserves to be revealed.